大家好，我是陈俊太老师。那我现在要开车回新竹，那所以就在车上顺便背一下我的新概念英文。那基本上，就是只是放录音带，所以不会影响到开车这样。Puma at large. Pumas are large cat-like animals which are found in America. When report came into London Zoo that a wild puma had been spotted 45 miles south of London, they were not taken seriously. However, as the evidence began to accumulate, experts from zoo felt obliged to investigate, for the description given by people who claimed to have seen the puma were extraordinarily similar. The hunt for the puma began in a small village, where a woman picking blackberries saw a large cat only 5 yards away from her. He immediately ran away when she saw it. An expert confirmed that a puma will not attack a human being unless it's cornered. The search proved difficult, for the puma was often observed at one place in the morning and another place 20 miles away in the evening. Wherever it went, it looked like dead deer and small animals like rabbits. Paw prints were seen in a number of places, and puma fur was found hanging in the bushes. Several people complained of cat-like noise at night, and businessmen on a fishing trip saw the puma up a tree. The expert now fully convinced that the animal was a puma, but where did it come from? As no puma had been reported missing from any zoo in the country, this one must have been the possession of a private collector and somehow managed to escape. The hunt went on for several weeks, but the puma was not caught. It is disturbing to think that a dangerous wild animal is still at large in a quiet countryside. 2. Z equals 1. Our vicar is always raising money for one cause or another, but he has never managed to get enough money to have the church clock repaired. The big clock, which used to strike hours, day and night, was damaged during the war and has been silent ever since. One night, however, our vicar woke up with a start. The clock was reading the hours. Looking at his watch, he saw that the 1 o'clock, but the bell struck 13 times before it stopped. Armed with the torch, the vicar went up into the clock tower to see what was going on. In the torchlight, he caught sight of a figure whom he immediately recognized as Bill Wilkins, a local grocer. "What are you doing up here, Bill?" asked the vicar in surprise. "I'm trying to repair the bell," answered Bill. "I've been coming here at night for weeks now. You see, I was hoping to give you a surprise." "You certainly did give me a surprise," said the vicar. "He probably woken up everyone in the village as well. Still, I'm trying to learn from him." "That's the trouble, vicar," answered Bill. "It's working alright. I'm afraid that 1 o'clock was tried 13 times, and there's nothing I can do about it." "We will get used to that, Bill," said the vicar. 13 is not as good as 1, but it's better than nothing. Now, let's go downstairs and have a cup of tea. Page 3. An unknown goddess. Some time ago, an interesting discovery was made by archaeologists on the Aegean island of Kea. American teen explorer temple, which stands in an ancient city on the promontory of Aya Areni. The city at one time must have been prosperous, for it enjoyed a high level of civilizations. Houses, often 3 stories high, were built of stone. They have large rooms with beautifully decorated walls. The city was even equipped with a drainage system, for a great many clay pipes were found beneath the narrow streets. The temple, which archaeologists explored, was used as a place of worship from the 15th century BC until Roman times. In the most sacred room of the temple, clay fragments of 15 statues were found. Each of these represented a goddess and had at one time been painted. The body of one statue was found among remains dating from the 15th century BC. happened to be among remains of the 5th century BC. This hat must have been found in classical times and carefully preserved. It was very old and precious even then. When archaeologists reconstructed the fragment, they were amazed to find that the goddess turned out to be a very modern-looking woman. She stood 3 feet high and her hand rested on her hips. She was wearing a full-length skirt which swept the ground. Despite her gay age, she was very graceful indeed, but so far, the archaeologists have been unable to discover her identity. Passage 5. The Download Life of Alfred Brooks. These days, people who do manual work often receive far more money than clerks work in offices. People who work in offices are frequently referred to as white-collar workers for the simple reason that they usually wear a collar and tie to go to work. Such is human nature that a great many people are often willing to sacrifice and pay for the privilege of becoming white-collar workers. This can give rise to purely situation, as it did in the case of Alfred Brooks, who worked as a dustman for the Ellesmere Corporation. When he got married, Alf was too embarrassed to say anything to his wife about his job. He simply told her that we worked for the corporation. Every morning, he left home dressed in a fine black suit. He then changed into overalls and spent the next 8 hours as a dustman. Before returning home at night, he took a shower and changed back into his suit. Alf did this for over 2 years, and his fellow dustman kept his secret. Alf's wife has never discovered that she married a dustman, and she never will, for Alf has just found another job. He will soon be working in his office as a general clerk. He will be earning only half as much as he used to, but he feels that a rise in status is well worth the loss of money. From now on, he will wear a suit all day, and others will call him Mr. Brooks, not Alf. Passage 5. Facts. Editors of newspapers and magazines often go to the extreme to provide the readers with unknown activities. Last year, journalists have been instructed by a well-known magazine to write an article on the present politics in the new African Republic. When the article arrived, the editor read the first sentence and then refused to publish it. The article began, 100 steps lead to the high wall which surrounds the president's palace. The journalist set out to instruct him to find out the exact number of steps and the height of the wall. The journalist immediately set out to find facts. A long time to send them. Meanwhile, the editor was getting impatient. The magazine would soon go to the press. He sent the journalist 2 urgent telegrams, but receiving no reply. He sent yet another telegram, informing the journalist that if he did not reply soon, he would be fired. When the journalist again failed to reply, the general immediately published the article written. A week later, the editor received a telegram from the journalist. Not only had the poor man been arrested, but he had been sent to prison as well. However, he had last been allowed to send a cable in which he informed the editor he had been arrested while counting the 1,084 steps leading to the 15-foot wall which surrounded the president's palace. 6. Smash and grab. Expensive shop in the famous arcade near Piccadilly was just opening. At this time of the morning, the arcade was almost empty. Mr. Taylor, the owner of a jewelry shop, was buying a new window display. 2 of his assistants had been working busy since 8 o'clock and had only just finished. Diamond necklaces and rings had been beautifully arranged on a background of black velvet. After getting delayed for several minutes, several players went back into his shop. The silence was suddenly broken when a large car with a headlight on was one bearing rolled down the arcade. Only those outside the jewelers One man stayed at the wheel, while two others with black stockings over their faces jumped out and smashed the window of the shop's iron bars. While this was going on, Mr. Taylor was upstairs. He and his staff bring swollen furniture out the window. Chairs and tables went flying into the arcade. One of the thieves was struck by a heavy statue, but he was too busy helping himself to diamonds to notice any pain. The raid was over in 3 minutes, for the man dragged the leg into the car and he moved off at fantastic speed. When we were leaving, Mr. Taylor rushed out and ran after it, throwing ashtrays and vases, but it was impossible to stop the thief. They had got away with some pounds worth of diamonds. Past 11. Chosen often have far more sense than their elders. These simple truths were then rendered dramatically during a civil defense exercise in a small town in Canada. The inhabitants would take part in the exercise, during which they would pretend the city had been bombed. Every warning was sounded, and thousands of people went into special area shelters. Doctors and nurses remained above ground, while police patrolled the street in case anyone tried to leave the shelters too soon. The police did not have much to do because citizens took exercise seriously. They stayed underground for 20 minutes, waiting for the siren to sound again. On leaving the area shelters, they saw that doctors and nurses were busy. A great many people have volunteered to act as casualty. Theatrical makeup and artificial blood and techniques to make injury look realistic. All the people were lying dead in the street. The living helped carry the dead and wounded to a special station. One of the thieves was brought in by two adults. The child was supposed to be dead. With theatrical makeup on his face, it looked as if he died of shock. Some people were so moved by the sight that they began to cry. However, the doctor turned up and Dr. Exing to comment on his death. The child looked around for a moment and said, "I think they are crazy." 8. A famous monastery. The Great Saint Bernard Pass connects Switzerland to Italy. At 2,470 meters, it is the highest mountain pass in Europe. The famous monastery of Saint Bernard, which was founded in the 11th century, lies about a mile away. For hundreds of years, Saint Bernard dogs have saved the lives of travelers crossing the dangerous path. These friendly dogs, which were first brought from Asia, were used as watchdogs even in Roman times. Now that the tunnel has been built through the mountains, the path is less dangerous. But each year, the dogs still set out into the snow whenever a traveler is in difficulty. Despite the new tunnel, several people will rush to tent to cross the pass on foot. During the summer months, the monastery is very busy, for it's visited by thousands of people who cross the pass on cars. As there are so many people about, the dogs have to be picked in a special enclosure. In winter, however, the monastery is quite different. The temperature drops to minus 30 degrees, and very few people attempt to cross the pass. From winter to summer, for they have more privacy. The dogs have greater freedom too, for they are allowed to wander outside the enclosure. Only regular visitors to the monastery in winter are party of skill who go there at Christmas and Easter. These young people who always receive a warm welcome from the Saint Bernard Monastery. Page 9. A trip to Mars. By now, a rocket will settle on a 35 million mile trip to Mars, and scientists must brace arrangements for the result. The rocket will be traveling for 6 months before it reaches the planet. It contains a number of scientific instruments, including a television camera. Any pictures that are taken will have to travel for 3 minutes before they reach the Earth. If the pictures are successful, they may solve a number of problems about Mars and provide information on the marketing service, which nearly 100 years ago, the astronomer Schiaparelli thought to be connected. It will be a long time before any landing on Mars can be attended. this will be all when I learn more. That's wrong. Right. A satellite can one day be put in orbit around Mars. Scientists will be able to find out a great deal. An interesting suggestion for measuring the atmosphere around Mars has been forwarded. A rubber ball containing a radio transmitter could be dropped from the satellite so that it could fall to the surface of the planet. The plate will slow down, and scientists will be able to find it. It may even be possible to drop a capsule containing scientific reasoning to the planet's surface. Only when a great deal more information has been obtained, it will be possible to plan a manned trip to Mars. Passage 9. Titanic. The great ship Titanic sailed for New York from Southampton on April 10, 1912. She was carrying 1,316 passengers and crew of 891. Even by modern standards, the 46,000-ton Titanic was a colossal ship. At that time, however, she was not only the largest ship that had ever been built, but was regarded as unsinkable, for she had 16 tight compartments. Even if 2 of these were flooded, she would still be able to float. The tragic sinking of this great liner will always be remembered, for she went out on her first voyage with heavy loss of life. 4 days after setting out, while the Titanic was sailing across by the a huge iceberg was suddenly spotted by a lookout. After the alarm had been given, the great ship turned sharply toward the great collection. The Titanic turned sharply in time, nearly missed the immense walls of ice, which rolled over 100 feet on the water beside her. Suddenly, there was a slight trembling sound from below, and the captain went down to see what had happened. The noise had been so faint that no one saw the ship had been damaged. Below, the commandant noticed in the horror that the Titanic was sinking rapidly, for 5 of 16 watertight compartments had already been flooded. The order to abandon ship was given, and hundreds of people plunged into the icy water. As there were not enough water for everybody, 1,500 lives were lost. Not guilty. Going through the custom is a tiresome business. The strange thing about it is that really honest people often feel guilty. The hardened professional smuggler, on the other hand, is never troubled by such a feeling, even if I have 500 gold watches hidden in his suitcase. When I returned from abroad recently, a particular officious young customs officer clearly regarded me as a smuggler. "Have you anything to declare?" he asked, looking me in the eye. "No," I said confidently. "Would you mind unlocking the suitcase, please?" "Not at all," I answered. The officer opened the case with great care. All the things I had packed so carefully were soon in a dreadful mess. I felt sure I would never be able to close the case again. Suddenly, I saw the officer's face light up. He had spotted a tiny bottle at the bottom of my case, and he punched on it with delight. "Perfume, eh?" he asked sarcastically. "You should have declared that. Perfume is exempt from import duty." "But isn't perfume," I said. "It's hair oil." Then I added with a smile, "It's a strange mixture I made myself." As I expected, he did not believe me. "Try it," I said encouragingly. The officer okay, and put the bottle to his nose. It was greeted by an unpleasant smell. Obviously, that was the only choice. A few minutes later, I was hurried away with precious trauma on my baggage. Passage 3. On Desert Island. Most of us have formed an unreal picture of life on a desert island. We sometimes imagine a desert island to be a sort of paradise, where the sun always shines. Life there is simple and good. Ripe fruit fall from the trees, and you never have to work. The other side of the picture is quite the opposite. Life on this island is wretched. You either starve to death or run Robinson Crusoe, waiting for a boat which never comes. Perhaps there is an element of truth in both these pictures, but few of us have understood to find out. 2 men who recently spent 5 days on a tour island, which they had stayed there longer. They were taking a bathing boat from the Virgin Island to Miami to have a repair. During the journey, the boat began to sink. They went to below the rocks were updated with food, matches, and tins of beer, and rowed for a few miles across the Caribbean until arrived at a tiny coral island. There were hardly any trees on the island, and there was no water, but this did not prove to be a problem. The men collected rainwater in the ravine. As they had brought spear guns with them, they had planned to eat. They caught lobster and fish every day, and as wonderfully ate like kings. When a passing tanker rescued them 5 days later, both men were genuinely sorry that they had to leave. 13. It's only me. After her husband had gone to work, Mrs. Rachel sent the children to school and went upstairs to her bathroom. She was too excited to do anything for that morning, for in the evening she would be going to a fancy dress party with her husband. She intended to dress up as a ghost, and as she had met the custom the night before, she was intending to dress up. The custom consisted only the shape was very effective. After putting it on, Mrs. Rachel went downstairs. She wanted to find out whether it would be comfortable to wear. Just as Mrs. Rachel was entering the dining room, there was a knock on the front door. She knew that it must be the baker. She had told him to come straight in if everything failed to open the door, and to leave the bread on the kitchen table. Now wanting a friend of poor man, Mrs. Rachel quickly cleaned the small door and climbed the stairs. She heard the front door open and stepped into the hall. Suddenly, the door of the storeroom was open, and a man entered. Then Rachel realized that it must be the man from the electricity board who had come to read the meter. She tried to explain the situation, saying, "It's only me," but it was too late. The man let out a cry and jumped back several paces. When Mrs. Rachel walked toward him, he fled and slammed the door behind him. Page 14. Note against her. There was a time when the owner of a shop in Chicago had to pay large sums of money to gangsters in return for protection. If the money was not paid promptly, the gangster would quickly put the man out of business by throwing his shop. Obtaining protection money is not a minor crime. As from the 14th century, an Englishman, Sir John Farquhar, made a remarkable discovery that people would rather pay large sums of money than their life were destroyed by gangsters. 600 years ago, Sir John Farquhar arrived in Italy with a band of soldiers and settled New Florence. He soon made a name for himself and came to be known to the Italian and Giovanni Acuto. Whenever the Italian citizens would avoid each other, Farquhar used to hire his soldiers to princes who were willing to pay high prices demanded. In times of peace, when business was bad, Farquhar used to find much interest in states, and after burning down a few farms, he would offer to go away when protection money was paid to them. Farquhar made large sums of money his way. In spite of this, his talent regarded him as sort of a hero. When he died at the age of 80, the foreign gave him a spare funeral, and his future painting was dedicated to the memory of the most valiant soldier and the most notable leader, Senior Giovanni Acuto. Page 16. Expense was of trouble. Children often receive small gifts of money. Fathers, of course, provide a regular supply of market money. On the other hand, always a source of extra income. With some children, small sums go a long way. If sixpence are not exchanged for sweets, they rattle for months inside money bags. Only very swift children manage to fill a money box. For most of them, sixpence is a small price paid for satisfying bar chocolate. My nephew George has a money box, but it's always empty. Very few sixpence I have given him have found their way there. I gave him sixpence yesterday and invited him to save it. Instead, he bought himself sixpence worth of trouble. On his way to the sweet shop, he dropped his sixpence and rolled along the pavement and then disappeared down the drain. George took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeve, and pushed his right arm through the drain cover. He could not find his sixpence anywhere, and what is more, he could not get his arm out. A crowd of people gathered around him and laid his one arm with soap and butter, but George was very stuck. A fire relay was called, and two firemen freed George using a special type of grease. George was not too upset by his relevance because the lady on the sweep shop heard about his trouble and rewarded him with a large box of chocolate. Passage 16. Mary had a little lamb. Mary and her husband Dimitri lived in a tiny village of Pericola in southern Greece. One of Mary's prized possessions was a little white lamb which her husband had given her. She kept it tied to a tree in the field during the day and went to fetch it every evening. One evening, however, the lamb was missing. The rope had been cut, so it was obvious the lamb had been stolen. When Dimitri came in from the field, his wife feeling what had happened, Dimitri found out He knew that it would not prove difficult for such a small village. After telling several of his friends about the theft, Dimitri found out that his neighbor, Aleko, had suddenly acquired a new lamb. He immediately went to Aleko's house and angrily accused him of stealing the lamb. He had better return it, or he would call the police. Aleko denied taking it and led Dimitri into his yard. It was true that he had just bought a lamb, his one, but his lamb was black. Ashamed of having the act so rashly, Dimitri apologized to Aleko for having accused him. While they were talking, it began to rain, and Dimitri stayed in Aleko's house until the rain stopped. When he went outside half an hour later, he was astonished to find that the little black lamb was almost white. Its wool, which had been dyed black, had been washed clean by the rain. Page 17. Greatest bridge in the world. Very known an Italian about little stone, sailed into Finland harbor in 1524 and named it Angoulême. She described it as a very good situation, located between two small hills in the midst of which flowed a great river. Though Varana is by no means considered to be a great explorer, his name will probably remain immortal, for on November 21st, 1964, the greatest bridge in the world was named after him. The Varana Bridge was designed by Osman Ahmad, joins Brooklyn to Staten Island. It has a span of 4,260 feet. The bridge is so long, the shape of the earth has been taken into account by its designer. Two great towers support four huge cables. The towers are built on smooth underwater platform made of sugar concrete. The platform extends to a depth of over 100 feet under the sea. This alone took 16 months to build. Above the surface of the water, the tower rises to a height of 700 feet. This alone, on which the bridge has been suspended. Each of the four cables contains 26,108 meters of wire. It has been estimated that if the bridge were packed with cars, it would still only be possible to fill its total capacity. However, size and chance are not the only important thing about this bridge. Despite its immensity, it's both simple and elegant, fulfilling its designer's dream to create an enormous object drawn as faintly as possible. Page 18. Electric currents in modern art. Modern sculpture rarely surprises us anymore. The idea that modern art can only be seen in museums is mistaken. Even people who have no interest in art cannot fail to notice examples of modern sculpture on display in public spaces. Transformed standing gardens and outside buildings and shops. We have got quite used to them. Some so-called modern pieces have been on display for nearly 50 years. In spite of this, some people, including myself, were surprised by the exhibition of modern sculpture. The first thing I done when I entered the art gallery was notice which said, "Do not touch the exhibit, some of them are dangerous." The objects on display was piece of nail launcher, only shaped foam that is subsided from the ceiling, and moving bound through the gusts of wind are quite familiar to everybody. These objects, however, were different. Lined up against the wall, they were long thin wire attached to metal spheres. The spheres that be magnetized and attract each other all the time. In the center of the hall, there were a number of tall structures which contained color lights. These lights flickered continuously like traffic lights projected on a map. Sparks were emitted from small black buses, and red lamps flashed on and off angrily. It was rare like an exhibition of prehistoric electronic instruments. This peculiar form not only seemed designed to shock people emotionally, but to give them electric shocks as well. Verse 13. Electric cat. Kidnappers are rarely interested in animals, but rather to consider interest in Miss Anna Ramsey's cat. Miss Anna Ramsey, a very wealthy old lady, has shared a flat with cat Rustus for a great many years. Rustus is an older life. He usually takes a short walk in the evening and is always home by 7 o'clock. One evening, however, he failed to arrive. Miss Ramsey got very worried. They looked everywhere for him but could not find him. 3 days after the first experience, Mr. Ramsey received an anonymous letter. The writer stated that Russell was in safe hand and would return immediately if Miss Ramsey paid a ransom of £1,000. Miss Ramsey was instructed to put money in a cardboard box and to leave it outside her door. The police, but fearing that she would never see Russell again, the letter was quite clear. She changed her mind. She drew £1,000 from the bank and followed the kidnapping instructions. The next morning, Roxy disappeared, and Miss Ramsey was sure the kidnapper would keep his words. Sure enough, Mr. Ramsey as she went out that evening. He looked very well, though he was very thirsty. He drank half a bottle of milk. The police were sounding, and Mr. Ramsey told them what she had done. She explained that Russell was very dear to her. Considering the amount she paid, he was dear in more ways than one. Pioneer pilots. In 1908, Lord Northcliffe offered a prize of £1,000 to the first man to fly across the English Channel. Over a year passed before the first attempt was made. On July 19, 1909, early morning, Hubert Lassen took off on the French coast in his plane, Antoinette 4. He traveled only 7 miles across the channel when the engine failed, and he was forced to land on the sea. The Antoinette floated on the water until Lassen was picked up by a ship. 2 days later, Louis Blériot arrived near Calais with a plane called Number 11. Blériot had been making planes since 1905, and it was his latest model. A week before, he had completed a successful overland flight, during which he covered 26 miles. Latham, however, did not give up easily. He too arrived near Calais on the same day with a new Antoinette. It looked as if they were a surprise race across the channel. Both planes were going to take off on July 21st. Latham failed to get up early enough. After making a short test flight at 4:15 a.m., Blériot set up half an hour later. His great flight lasted 37 minutes. When he landed near Dover, the first person to greet him was a local policeman. Latham made another attempt a week later and got within half a mile of Dover, but he was unlucky again. He failed, and he landed on the sea for the second time. That's 31. Daniel Mendoza. Boxing matches were very popular 200 years ago. In those days, boxers fought with benefits for prize money. Because of this, they were known as prize fighters. However, boxing was very cruel, for there were no rules and prize fighters. One of the most notable figures in boxing history, was born in 1764. The use of gloves was not introduced until 1860, when the Marquis of Queensberry drew up the first set of rules. That was technically a prize fighter. Into a sport, for he brought science to the game. In his day, Mendoza enjoyed tremendous popularity. He was adored by rich and poor alike. Mendoza rose to fame swiftly at the boxing matches when only 14 years old. This attractive Spanish Richard Humphrey was then the most known boxer in England. Mendoza was quick to learn. In fact, Mendoza soon became so successful that Humphrey turned against him. The two men crawled bigly, and it was clear that argument could only be settled by a fight. A match was held at Spilton, where both men fought for an hour. The public better real money on Mendoza. Mendoza met Humphrey in the ring on a later occasion, and he lost for a second time. It was not until a certain match in 1790 that he finally beat Humphrey and champion of England. Meanwhile, he founded a highly successful academy. Even Lord Byron became one of his pupils. He earned so much money and was paid as much as £100 for a single appearance. Despite this, he was so extravagant, he was always in debt. After he was defeated by a boxer called Gentleman Jackson, he was quickly forgotten. He was sent to prison for failing to pay his debt and died in poverty in 1836. By heart. Some plays were so successful that they run for years on end. In many ways, this is unfortunate for actors who are required to go on repeating the same night after night. One would expect them to know their part by heart and never have course for them. Yet this is not always the case. A famous actor in a highly successful play was once cast in a role in a risk crime who had been in prison on the bail for 20 years. In the last act, a jailer will always come on stage with a letter which will hand to the prisoner. Even though the role was expected to read the letter as your performance, he always insisted he would read it out in full. One night, the jailer decided to play a joke on his colleague to find out if, after so many performances, he had managed to learn the content of the letter by heart. The curtain went up on the final act of the play and revealed the registrar sitting alone behind bars in his back cell. Just then, the jailer appeared with the precious letter in his hand. He entered the cell and presented the letter to the jury crowd. But the copy he gave him had not been written well before as usual. It was simply a blank sheet of paper. The jailer looked on eagerly, anxious to see his fellow actor at last learn his lines. The noble stared at a blank sheet of paper for a few seconds. Then, squinting his eye, he said, "The light is dim. Read the letter to me." And he promptly sent a sheet of paper to the letter. Finding I could not remember all the letter either, the jailer replied, "The letter is in, sir. I must get my glasses." With this, he hurried up the stage. Much to the crowd's amusement, the jailer returned a few moments later with a pair of glasses and the usual copy of the letter, which he proceeded to read to the prisoner. 24. One man's meat is another man's poison. People become quite illogical when they try to decide what can be eaten and what cannot be eaten. If you eat in the Mediterranean, for instance, you will consider octopus a great delicacy. You will not be able to understand why some people find it repulsive. On the other hand, your stomach will turn at the idea of frying potato in animal fat, the normally accepted practice in many northern countries. The sad truth is that most have been brought up for foods, and we stick to them all our lives. No creature has received more praise and abuse than the common garden snails. Cooked in wine, snails are a great luxury in various parts of the world. There are countless people who Even in the early years, they were not associated snails with food. My friend Robert lived in a country where snails are despised. In a large town, he has a garden of his own. For years, he has been asking me to collect snails from my garden and take them to him. The idea never appealed to me very much. Well, one day, after a heavy shower, I happened to be walking in my garden when I noticed a huge number of snails taking a stroll on some of my prized plant. Acting on a sudden impulse, I collected several dozen, put them in a paper bag, and took them to Robert. Robert was delighted to see me and equally pleased with my little gift. I left the bag in the hall, and Robert and I went to the living room where we talked for a couple of hours. I let them all about the snail, when Robert suddenly said that I must pay to dinner. Snail would, of course, be the main dish. He didn't resist the idea, and returned following Robert out of the room. To our dismay, we saw that there were snails everywhere. They had escaped from the paper bag, and they had taken complete possession of the hall. I had never been able to look at snails since then. That's 24. A skeleton in a cupboard. Often in novels, how a seemingly respectable person or family has some terrible secret which has been concealed from strangers for years. English language possesses a lively saying to describe this sort of situation. The terrible secret is called the skeleton in the cupboard. At some dramatic moment in the story, the terrible secret becomes known and the reputation is ruined. The reader here stands on end when you read in the final page of the novel of the heroine, a dear old lady who had always been so kind to everybody, had, in her youth, poisoned every one of her 5 husbands. It is all very well for such things to occur in fiction. Very degree, we all have secrets which we not want our close friends to learn. But a few of us have skeleton in the cupboard. The only person I know who had a skeleton in the cupboard is George Carter, and he is very proud of the fact. George studied medicine in his youth. Instead of becoming a doctor, however, he became a successful writer of detective tales. George had a weekend, which I shall never forget at his house. George showed me to the guest room, which he said was rarely used. He took me to unpack my things and then come down to dinner. After I spent my tail and undergloves to empty drawers, I decided to hang the cupboard. One of the 2 suits I had brought with me. I opened the cupboard door and then stood in front of it petrified. The skeleton was dangling before my eyes. The sudden movement of the door swayed slightly, and it gave me the impression that it was about to leap down at me. Dropping in my suit, I dashed downstairs to tell George. This was more than a terrible secret. This was a real skeleton. But George was unsympathetic. Oh, that, he said, with a smile, as she was talking to our old friend. That's Sebastian. You forget there was a medical student once upon a time. Page 25. Cardi sock. One of the most famous censorship of the 19th century. The Cardi sock can still be seen in Greenwich. She stands on dry land and visited by thousands of people each year. She served as an impressive reminder of the great ships of the past. Before they were replaced by steam ships, sailing vessels like the Cardi sock were used to carry tea from China and wool from Australia. Cardi sock was one of the fastest sailing ships that ever been built. The only other ship to match her was the Monopoly. Both these ships sailed from Shanghai on June 18, 1872, on an exciting race to England. This race, which went on for exactly 4 months, was the last of its kind. It marked the end of the great tradition of ship sails and the beginning of naval era. The first of the 2 ships was the Monopoly. Lost in the ocean, the Cardi sock was the name. It seemed certain that she would be the first ship home. During the race, she had a lot of bad luck. In August, she was struck by a very heavy storm, during which her rudder was torn away. My son rolled from side to side, and became installed to steal her. Temporary rudder was made on board the airplane, and it was fitted with great difficulty. This greatly reduced the speed of the ship. While there was danger, they must retrieve quickly. This rudder would be torn away as well. Because of this, Khan sunk on the lee. After crossing the equator, Captain rolled forward perfect, but by now, only over 500 miles ahead. Although the new rudder fitted at tremendous speed, it was impossible to cut it to green. He arrived a week after launching. Even this was remarkable, considering that she had so many delays. There was no doubt that she had not run. She had run the race easily. Passage 26. Wanted a large disc contained. No one can avoid being devoured by advertisement. Much as we may talk about some good taste, we are no longer free to choose the thing we want. Advertising is a subtle influence on us. In their effort to persuade us to buy this or that product, advertisers have a close study of human nature and have classified all our little weaknesses. Advisor discovered years ago that all with love get something for nothing. In advertisement, which begin with the magic word free, can rarely go wrong. These days, advertisers not only offer free samples, but free cars, free houses, and free trips around the world as well. They devise hundreds of competitions, which will enable us to win huge sums of money. Radio and television have made it possible for advertisers to capture the attention of millions of people in this way. During the period of the event, a company that basically manufactures one explicitly black mixing and then the factory. Offered to pay £2,000 for the biggest mixing baked by a listener. The response to this competition was tremendous. Before long, biscuits of all shapes and sizes began to arrive in the factory. One lady boarding a biscuit on a wheelbarrow. It weighed nearly 500 pounds. A little later, a man came along with a big thing, which occupied the whole board of this car. All the biscuits were sent carefully weighed. The largest was 770 pounds. It certainly should be the prize. But just before the competition closed, a lorry arrived at the factory with a truly colossal biscuit, which weighed only 400 pounds. It is baked by college students who use over 500 pounds of flour, 800 pounds of sugar, 200 pounds of fat, and 400 pounds of various other ingredients. It was so heavy that a crane had to be removed from the lorry. The manufacturer had to pay more money than they expected, for they bought biscuits from a student for $4,800. What went well and nothing to buy. It has been said everyone lives by selling something. In the light of this statement, teachers live by selling knowledge, philosophers live by selling wisdom, and priests by selling spiritual comfort. Though it may be possible to value material goods in terms of money, it's extremely difficult to estimate the true value of services which people perform on us. There are times when we are willing to give everything we possess to save our lives. Yet, we might grudge paying the surgeon from our feet for offering us precisely this service. The condition of society is such that skills have to be paid for in the same way that goods are paid for at a shop. Everyone has something to sell. Champs seem to be the only exception to this general rule. Beggars almost sell themselves as human beings to arouse the pity of passers-by. But real tramps are not beggars. They have nothing to sell and require nothing from others. In seeking independence, they do not sacrifice their human dignity. A tramp may ask you for money, but he will never ask you to feel sorry for him. He has deliberately chosen to live the life he lives, and he is fully aware of the consequences. He may never be sure where the next meal is coming from, but he is free from the sudden anxiety which afflicts other people. His few material possessions will be possible for him to mix with one place with ease. Having a circling open, he gave far across the world of names than most of us ever do. He may hunt, beg, or steal occasionally to keep himself alive. He may even entice or indeed be out of the work, but he will never sacrifice his freedom. We often speak of tramps with contempt and put them in the same class as beggars. How many of us can honestly say that we cannot fail a little envious of their small way of life and their freedom from care? Yeah. To the small balls loaded with sped through grey liner as she was entering the harbor. Before she entered, men from board and climbed on board, and decks were soon covered with colorful rock from Persia, silk India, copper coffee pot, and beautiful handmade silverware. It was difficult not to be tempted. Many of tourists on board had begun bargaining with the tradesmen, but they decided not to buy anything on board. I had no sooner got off the ship than was stalled by a man who wanted to sell me a diamond ring. I had no intention of buying one, but we could not see a fail recognized by the size of diamonds. Some of them were super examples. The man went very dense to prove the diamonds were real. As we were passing by the shop, the ball funny against the window made a deep impression in the glass. It took me over half an hour to get rid of it. The next man to approach me was selling expensive pens and watches. I examined one of the pens closely. It started to look genuine, and based on the hotel word "Made in the USA" had been made inscribed. The man said that the pen was worth £10, but as a fixed fee he would limit it to £8. I shook my head and held up a finger, indicating it was willing to pay £1. Finally, the man acted with my over outrageous, but if he measured the price for £3. Putting my helmet, I began to walk away, but a moment later, he ran after me and shot the pen into my hands. Though he kept throwing his arm in despair, he eventually accepted the pound I gave him. I don't know the place where my money was until I got back to the ship. Now, when I tried, it was impossible to build this beautiful pen with ink. Until this day, he had never written a single word. Later. Or not. Whether we find a joke funny or not largely depends on where people are. The sense of humor is misread by with natural and characteristics. A Frenchman, for instance, might find a sharp funny joke, and the same way, a Russian might fail to see anything amusing in the joke which will make an Englishman laugh to tears. Most funny stories are based on common situations, inspired by the nation of terrorists. Certain funny stations have a uniform feel. No matter where you live, you will find it difficult not to laugh as they chant chapters. However, humor, largely from America, currently come into fashion. It's called sick humor. Comedians base their joke on tragic situations like violent deaths or serious accidents. Many people find this sort of joke distasteful. The following example of sick humor will enable you to judge for yourself. A man who had wrote that his right leg was taken to the hospital a few weeks before Christmas. From the moment he arrived there, he kept apparently be able to go home. He dreaded having to threaten relatives in the hospital. Though the customer did his best, the patient recovery was slow. On Christmas Day, the man still has right leg in plaster. He spent the next whole day in bed, so the old function was missing. The following day, however, the doctor consulted him and told him that the chance may be impossible for him to use the operation to a good. The man of heart, and sure enough, on New Year's Eve was able to overcome our body. Compensate for his unpleasant experience in the hospital. The journey drank more than in the process, he enjoyed himself thoroughly and kept telling everybody how much he hated hospitals. He was still mumbling something about hospitals at the end of the party when slipped on a piece of ice and broke his left leg. Past 30, the death of a ghost. For years, Villagers believed that the ending farm was haunted. The farm was owned by two brothers, Joe and Bill Cox. They employed a few farm hands, but no one was willing to work there alone. Every time the worker gave up his job, he told the same story. Farm laborers say they always woke up to find the work had been done overnight. Hay had been cut and caution had been cleaned. A farm worker would stay about all night, clinging to a slender figure cutting corn in the moonlight. In time, it became a suspect fact that caused perhaps employer contribution of ghosts that they wanted work for them. No one suspected there might be someone else on the farm who had never been seen. This was indeed the case. A short time ago, villagers were starting to learn that the ghost of Anthony had died. Everyone went to the funeral, for the ghost was none other than Aaron Cox. A third brother was supposed to have died as a young man. After the funeral, Joe and Bear revealed a secret which they have kept for over 40 years. Eric had been the son of family. He had been obliged to join the army during the First World War. As he hated army life, he decided to desert his regiment. When he learned that he was sent abroad, he returned to the farm and hid it. Fearing the authorities, Eric remained hiding after the war as well. His father told everybody home until in action. The only other people who knew the secret were Joe and Bert. They did not even tell their wives. When their father died, also they duty to keep Eric in hiding. All these years, Eric had lived reckless. He used to sleep in the day and work at night, quite unaware of fact, even told Anthony. When he died, however, his brother found it impossible to keep it any longer. Which is one, a lovable eccentric. True eccentrics never deliberately set out to draw attention to themselves. They disregard social conventions without being conscious they are doing anything extraordinary. This will never win to learn, love and read with others, but adding colors to the routine of everyday life. Much at the time of his death, Richard Carlson was one of the most colorful figures in our town. He was a true and wealthy businessman, but ordinarily harmful, hardly knew anything about this side of his life. He was known to us all as Dickie, and his eccentricity had become legendary long before he died. Dickie disliked him intensely. Though he owned a large car, he hardly ever used it, preferring always to go on foot. Even when it was raining heavily, he refused to carry an umbrella. One day, he walked into an expensive shop after having caught in a particularly heavy shower. He wanted to find a 100-pound fur coat for his wife, but he was in such a bedraggled condition that his sister refused to serve him. Dickie left the shop without a word and returned carrying a large cloth bag. As it was extremely heavy, he dumped it on the counter. The assistant asked him to leave, but Dickie paid no attention to him and requested to see the manager. Recognizing who the customer was, the manager was most apologetic and reprimanded the assistant severely. When Dickie was given the fur coat, he presented the assistant with the cloth bag. He paid 300 pounds in pennies and insisted on the money before he left. 72,000 pennies and all. On one occasion, he invited a number of important critics to see his private collection of modern paintings. This exhibition received a great deal of attention in the press. Although the picture was supposed to be the work of a famous artist, it had in fact been painted by Dickie. It took him 4 years to stage this elaborate joke, simply to prove the critics do not always know what they are talking about. A lost ship. The salvage operation had been a complete failure. The small ship, Elko, which had been searching the Barren Sea for weeks, was on its way home. A radio message from the mainland had been received by the ship's captain, instructing him to give up the search. The captain knew that another attempt would be made later, for the sunken ship he was trying to find had been carrying a precious cargo of gold bullion. Despite the message, the captain of the Alcor decided to try once more. The sea base was scoured with powerful nets, and there was extreme excitement on board when a request was raised from the bottom. Though the crew were at first under the impression that the cargo was found, the contents of the sea chest proved them wrong. What they in fact found was a ship which had been sunk many years before. The chest contained the personal belongings of seaman Alan Fielding. There were books, clothing, and photographs, together with letters which the seaman had once received from his wife. The captain of the Alcor ordered the men to salvage as much as possible from the wreck. Nothing of value was found. The numerous items which were brought to the surface proved to be of great interest. From the heavy gun that was raised, the captain realized that the ship must have been a cruiser. In another sea chest, which contained the belongings of the ship's officer, there was an unfinished letter which had been written on March 14, 1943. The captain learned from the letter that the name of the lost ship was the Karen. The most valuable find of all was the ship's logbooks, parts of which it was still possible to read. From this, the captain was able to piece together all the information that had come to light. The Karen had been sailing in a convoy to Russia, where she was torpedoed by an enemy submarine. This was later confirmed by a naval official at the Exodus after Alcor had returned home. All the items that were found were sent to the War Museum. 33. A day to remember. We have all experienced days when everything goes wrong. A day may begin well enough, but suddenly everything seems to get out of control. What invariably happens is that a great number of things choose to go wrong at precisely the same moment. It is a single unimportant event set up a chain of reactions. Let us go on you are preparing a meal and keeping an eye on the baby at the same time. The telephone rings, and this month trailer was unforeseen series of catastrophe. While you are on the phone, the baby pulled the tablecloth off the table, smashing half your fresh crockery and cutting itself in the process. You cannot hurry and tend to baby crockery, etc. Meanwhile, the meal gets burned. As it is what I'm through the years, your husband arrived, unexpected, to bring 6 guests to dinner. Things can go wrong on a big scale, and a number of people recently discovered in Parramatta, a suburb of Sydney. During the rush hour one evening, two cars collided, and both drivers began arguing. The woman immediately behind the cars happened to be a learner. She suddenly got into a panic and stopped the car. This made the driver following her brake hard. His wife was sitting behind him holding a large cake. As she was thrown forward, the cake went flying through the windscreen and landed on the road. Seeing the cake flying through the air, a lorry driver was drawing up alongside the car, pulled up all of a sudden. The lorry was loaded with empty beer bottles, and hundreds of them slipped off the back of the vehicle and onto the road. This meant yet another angry argument. Meanwhile, the traffic piled up behind. It took the police nearly an hour to jerk the traffic on the move again. In the meantime, the lorry driver had to sweep up hundreds of broken bottles. Only 2 stray dogs benefited from all this confusion, while they greedily devoured the left of the cake. It was just one of those days. Past 36 for a happy discovery. Antique shop is a peculiar fascination on a great many people. The more expensive kind of antique shop, where rare objects are beautifully displayed in glass cases to keep them free from dust, is usually a forbidden place. But it is worth it to encourage in a less pretentious antique shop. It's always hope, and in the labyrinth, musty, dark, disordered rooms, a real rarity will be found among the pile of assorted junk that litter the floors. No one discovers a rarity by chance. A truly dedicated searcher for art treasures must have patience, and above all, the ability to recognize the work of something when it existed. To do this, it must be at least a knowledgeable expert dealer, like a scientist making a discovery. You must cherish the hope, and one day you will be amply rewarded. My old friend, Frank Halliday, is just such a person. He has often described to me how he picked up a masterpiece for a mere £5. One Saturday morning, Frank visited an antique shop in the neighborhood. As he had never been there before, he found a great deal interesting. The morning passed rapidly, and Frank was about to leave when he noticed a large packing case lying on the floor. The dealer told him he had just come in, but he could not be bothered to open it. Frank begged him to do so, and the dealer reluctantly priced the open. The contents were disappointing. Apart from an intriguing-looking carved dagger, the box was full of crockery, much had broken. Frank quickly removed the crockery out of the box, and suddenly noticed a miniature painting at the case. As his composition in line, reminding him of an Italian painting he knew well, he decided to buy it. Glancing at it briefly, the dealer told him that it was £5. Frank finally concealed his excitement, but he knew that he had made a fatal discovery. The tiny painting proved to be mounted by Correggio on the worth £5,000. Patch was done. The word justice is usually associated with courts of law. We might say that justice has been done when a man's innocence or guilt has been proved beyond doubt. Justice is part of the common machinery of law. Those who seek it undertake an arduous journey and can never be sure that they will find it. Judges, however, are human and can make mistakes. There are rare instances when justice almost ceases to be the administration. Reward or punish are mediocre, quite independent when you even make choices. Nevertheless, justice acts as a living force. When we use a phrase like "we serve in right," we are, in part, admitting that a certain set of duties enable justice to act on his own accord. Say what's called on the premises a large festival one morning, the shop assistant must find it impossible to resist the temptation to say, "It's serving right." The shop was an old-fashioned one, which made large disused fireplace and cold narrow chimneys. Before midday, the girl heard a muffled cry become from behind one of the walls. As the cry was repeated several times, she ran to tell the manager, who promptly ran out of the fire brigade. As the cry was repeated one of the chimneys, but so many of them, the firemen could not be certain which one it was. They located the white chimney by tapping on the wall and listened for the man's cry. After chipping through the wall, which was 18 inches thick, they found that the man had been trapped in the chimney. As it was narrow, the man was unable to move, but the firemen were eventually able to free him by cutting a huge hole in the wall. The sorry-looking, blackened figure that emerged at once admitted that he had tried to break into the shop during the night, but got stuck in the chimney. He had been there for nearly 10 hours. Justice had been done even before the man was handed over to the police. Passage 13. Chance in a million. We are less credulous than we used to be. In the 19th century, a novelist would bring his story to a conclusion by presenting his reader with a series of coincidences, most of them wildly improbable. Readers hoped it was the fact that Medlico's servant was revealed in mere mother. A long-lost brother who was presumed dead was really alive all the time, and weekly plotting brings about the hero's downfall, and so on. Modern readers will find such naive stories totally unsettling. Yet, in real life, circumstances too sometimes conspire to bring about coincidences which anyone but a 19th century novelist would find incredible. A German taxi driver, Franz Mussmann, recently found a brother who was thought to have been killed 20 years before. While on a walking tour with his wife, he stopped to talk a Walkman. After they had gone on, Mrs. Mussmann commented on the Walkman too relevant to her husband, and even suggested that he might be his brother. Frank paused on the idea, pointing out that his brother had been killed in action during the war. Though Miss Busman was fully acquainted with the story, she saw there was a chance in a million that he might be right. Then later, the boy to the worker asked him if his name was Hans Busman. Needless to say, the man wasn't that Busman, and he really was Hans's long-lost brother. Brothers were united. Hans explained how it was they were still alive. After having wounded to the end of the war, he has been sent to hospital and was separated from his unit. The hospital has been bombed, and Hans made his way back in Western Germany on foot. Meanwhile, his unit was lost, and all record of him had been destroyed. Hans returned to his home, but the house had been bombed, and no one in the neighborhood knew what had become of the inhabitants. Assuming that his family had been killed during the air raid, Hans settled down in a village 15 miles away, where he had been ever since. 到新竹啦。The west side of the express. We have learned to expect that the trains will be punctual. After years of preconditioning, most of them have been developed in unshakable pace and railway timetables. Ship may be delayed by storms, and air flight may be cancelled because of bad weather, but trains must be on time. Only an exceptionally heavy snowfall might temporarily dislocate railway services. It is all too easy to blame the railway authorities when something does go wrong. The truth is that when mistakes occur, they are more likely to be ours than theirs. After consulting my railway timetable, I noticed with satisfaction that one of those whispering to west of it. It went direct to my local station, and the journey lasted a mere hour and 70 minutes. When I boarded the train, I did not know that a great many people got on as well. At the time, this did not strike me as odd. I reflected there must be a great many people besides myself who wish to take advantage of this excellent service. Neither was I surprised when I went inside with it. A tiny station a few miles along the line. Even a mighty express train can be held up by signals. With the train doubled at station after station, I began to wonder. Was there the dawn on me that the express was not roaring down the line at 90 miles an hour, but barely chugging along at 30? 1 hour and 70 minutes passed, and we had not even covered half the distance. I asked the passenger if it was Western Express, but he did not even hear of it. I determined to lodge a complaint as soon as we arrived. 2 hours later, I was talking angrily to the station master when he denied the train's existence. I borrowed his copy of the timetable. There was no note of triumph in my voice when I told him it was there in black and white. Glancing at it briefly, he told me to look again. A tiny extra accompanied me to a phone book at the bottom of the case. Thus, the service has been suspended. Page 38. Chapter. Future historians will be in a unique position when they come to record the history of our lives. They will not distract from the great mass evidence steadily accumulate. What is more, they will not have to rely solely on written words. Films, gramophone records, and magnetic tapes will provide them with a bewildering amount of information. They will be able, as it were, to see and hear in action. But the historian intended to construct a distant task is always faced with a difficult task. He has to deduce what he can from the few scanty clues available. Even Sydney remains can shed interesting light on the history of early man. Up to now, the historians assume that Canada came into being with the advent of agriculture, for then once the man was faced with the new need to understand something about the seasons. Recent scientific evidence seems to indicate that the assumption is incorrect. Historians have long been puzzled by dots, lines, and symbols, ways on wall, bones, and ivy tests of mammals. The Norman who made these markings lived by hunting and fishing during the last ice age, which began about 25,000 BC and ended about 20,000 BC. Only marking played a very powerful role. Historians is able to read this difficult code. They have found that it's connected with the passage of days and phases of the moon. It is in fact a primitive spiral calendar. It's long been known that contains in the begin onward were not simply often artistic expression. They have a different meaning, for they were as many as the element to get to writing. It's possible that there is a different relation between this painting and the marking that sometimes accompany them. It seems that man was making a real effort to understand the seasons 20,000 years earlier than has been supposed. Page 39. Nothing to worry about. The rough road across the plain soon became so bad that we tried to get Bruce to drive back to the village we have come from. Even though the road was littered with boulders and hit with oars, Bruce was not in the least perturbed. Glancing at his map informed us that the next village was mere 20 miles away. It was not Bruce always understanding difficulties. He simply had no sense of danger at all. No matter what the conditions were, he believed that the car should be driven as far as it go. As we downloaded the track, we swerved over large boulders. The wheels rolled stones which hammered ominously under the car. We felt sure that sooner or later a stone will rip a hole in our petrol tank or damage the engine. Because of this, we kept looking back, wondering we were leaving a trail of oil and petrol behind us. What a relief was when the boulder suddenly disappeared. We moved away to a stretch of plain where the only obstacle were chunks of bushes. But there was worse to come. Just ahead of us, there was a huge fissure. In response to Remy's pleading, Bruce stopped. Though we all got out to examine the picture, we examined in the car. We informed him that the fissure extended for 50 yards and was 2 feet wide and 4 feet deep. Even this had no effect. Bruce engaged low gears and drove at terrifying speed, keeping the front wheel drive to crack as they followed their zigzag course. Before we had time to worry about what might happen, we were back on the plan again. Bruce consulted the map once more and told us that the village was now only 15 miles away. Our next obstacle was a shallow pool of water about half a mile across. Bruce charged at it, but in the middle, the car came to a grinding halt. A yellow light on the dashboard flashed angrily, and Bruce curiously announced there was no oil in the engine. 快到了。Page 40. Who's who? Aspen and his friend, why university students seem to enjoy practical jokes more than anyone else. Students specialize in a particular type of practical hoax. Inviting the fire brigade put out non-existent fires with a rule from exception, which no self-respecting student will ever indulge in. Students often create amusing situations which are funny to everyone except the victims. When a student recently saw 2 workmen using a pneumatic drill outside his university, he immediately telephoned the police and informed them that 2 students dressed up as workmen were tearing up the road with a pneumatic drill. As soon as he had hung up, he went over to the workmen and told them that if a policeman wanted them to go away, they were not to take them seriously. He added that a student had dressed up as a policeman and was playing all sorts of silly jokes on people. Both the police and the workmen were grateful to the student for this piece of advanced information. The student hid in the archway nearby, where he could watch and hear everything that went on. Sure enough, a policeman arrived on the train and politely asked the workman to go away. When you receive a very rude fly from one of the workmen, he threatened to remove them by force. The workman struggled to please, and the students telephoned for help. Shortly afterwards, the warnings arrived and remonstrated with the workman. As we refused to stop working, the police returned to the pneumatic drill. The workman struggled fiercely, and one man lost his temper, threatening to call the police. At this, the police pointed out ironically that this would hardly be necessary as the woman were already on arrest. Pretending to speak seriously, One of the workmen asked if I had a telephone call before beginning translation. Permission was granted, and the policeman was moving to a call box. Only when he saw that man was actually telephoning the police did he realize that they had all been the victims of a hoax. 好，从台北开到新竹，大概开了70公里，背了1个小时22分，新概念第3册的这个第一课到40册。不过，好像其实是有60课了。我下次有机会我们再来背一下这样子。然后基本上全程因为都没有看稿，反正基本上这个背诵基本上是因为我已经背得非常熟了，所以是脱口而出。所以事实上一边开车，我其实在想别的事情，然后嘴巴还可以一直背，所以根本大部分的时间是没有在想背的这个事情。那所以有点像是我们听这个歌曲一样，比如说你今天听到一个周杰伦的歌的话，你其实不去想他的歌词，你自己就可以朗朗上口唱出这个歌，有点像你在开车的时候听歌是一样的感觉。所以其实它没有跟开车其实没有什么关系，但是久了它基本上可以是有点练习英文的语感啦。那这一套教材是叫做新概念英文，那大家可以 Google 一下，比如说你可以 Google 一下新概念背诵。那我背的是第3册，那其实这个东西我已经背了，这个每一课大概都一定有100-200遍，绝对是超过，所以基本上就是为了练习一个英文的语感这样子。那我基本上大部分的时候就是，所以可以看到我背诵，像刚刚的话，我就从台北开回来的话，那我就是放他的这个 CD 嘛，那放他我 CD 基本上就同时跟他念，那一定要背得非常熟，基本上可以脱口而出，就有点像听歌一样，才可以跟着他这个同时背出来。所以大家有对英文有兴趣的人呢，其实你慢慢背，就是像我就是用一个教材嘛，那其实你不要这个放弃，就可以把它背得挺好的。那希望大家这个好好努力。那我现在是在这个阳明交通大学阳明交通大学的应用化学系当老师。那其实，在对英文背这样新概念对我来讲的好处是，譬如说我在国外参加会议啊，线上会议，甚至于我跟学生写英文论文，大部分其实就靠因为背新概念，所以这个语感就会具备有了。那而且背这个还有一个好处，就是事实上呢，我已经是有一点点其实已经在脑中背诵这个东西了，就是。那举例来讲，我今天去游泳池游泳的时候，事实上，譬如说我偶尔去交大游泳池游泳的时候，像我要游40趟嘛，那我其实脑中的时候，其实我根本不用背出来，我就有点像在我游第1趟的时候，我脑中就在背第1课。那有点像你可以想象，就是你可以在脑中放一首歌曲，像一个明星唱一个歌这样。我也是一样，所以其实我在游泳的时候也可以背诵这样英文。那开车的时候一样是这个样子。那我日文也是用这样子的方法在学习的，所以。就是希望大家可以好好的这个努力认真学习，然后因为我已经到新竹，现在是停在路边，就大家好好加油，好不好？